In the humid dawn of a summer morning in Savannah, Georgia, I decided to clean the house myself. Coastal rain was expected soon, and the humidity always made the old house feel heavy and dirty. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a rag, and stood in front of the living room window, determined to make it spotless. Just as I started wiping the glass, my phone buzzed. It was my childhood friend, Evelyn, whose cheerful voice came through the line. She was back in town for the day and insisted we meet for coffee. I couldn't turn her down. Evelyn and I had grown up together, running through fields and whispering secrets late at night. Hearing her voice filled me with warmth and excitement. Still, I felt guilty about leaving the chores undone. That's when I remembered Brianna Parrish. Brianna was a kind young neighbor who lived in the alley behind our house. She was a college student who often took on extra work when she needed money. I called her right away and explained my dilemma. Brianna agreed to help without hesitation. She arrived with cleaning supplies just minutes later, smiling gratefully when I explained what needed to be done. I handed her a spare key and a list of chores. Clean the study, scrub the staircase to the second floor, and be especially careful with Jerome's old dusty bookshelves. I reminded her to lock up when she finished. Her eyes were thankful, and I hurried off to meet Evelyn at the cafe feeling relieved I had helped her too. The Magnolia Tree Cafe was just a short drive away. Evelyn was already seated under a massive live oak draped in Spanish moss. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves in dancing patterns on our table. We sat outside and ordered iced coffee. Evelyn chattered about her life in the city and her grown children. I told her about Jerome, my husband who was making a name for himself as a novelist, and about my peaceful, though sometimes lonely days. We laughed at memories, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. I felt thankful for the warmth of an old friendship on that bright day. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. I saw Brianna's name and relaxed, thinking it was just an update. But the moment I answered, I heard panicked breathing. "Ms. Whitlock." Brianna's voice trembled. "Is there anyone else in the house?" My blood turned cold. "No, just me," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm at a cafe with Evelyn." "Why do you ask?" Silence. Then Brianna gasped. "There's a woman on the second floor. She's wearing a long white dress and messy hair. I saw her walking down the hallway, and then she disappeared into the last room." My heart stopped. Panic surging, I hissed, "Brianna, listen to me. Get out of the house now. Go to the front yard and wait. Lock the door behind you." I hung up immediately. Evelyn's eyes went wide with concern as I apologized and said I had an emergency. I ran to my car, dialing 911 as I started the engine. "There's someone in my house," I blurted to the dispatcher. "I just saw a woman inside. Please hurry." The police were on my street within minutes. I flung open the front door as they arrived and ushered 2 officers inside. They searched the entire house, every room, every closet, and even the shed in the backyard. Brianna waited on the front steps, white-faced and trembling. The officers emerged slowly. "Ma'am," the older officer said, "we checked everywhere. There's no one here. All doors and windows are locked from the inside. You might have been the only 2 here all along." Relief flooded me, but then Brianna suddenly gasped again. "I saw her, I swear," she insisted, voice quaking. She was real. I knelt beside Brianna and squeezed her hand. "It's okay," I said softly. "Maybe it was just a shadow or a trick of the light. This old house has all sorts of odd corners." Even as I comforted her, doubt crept into my mind. Just then, Jerome's car pulled into the driveway. I hurried out to meet him. He was carrying groceries and looked surprised to see the police car. I quickly explained. Jerome listened quietly and then approached Brianna with a kind smile. "You probably just saw something in the shadows," he said gently. "Old houses have strange corners. It must have been your imagination." Brianna, still trembling, nodded and left for home. I thanked the officers as they prepared to leave. They offered reassuring smiles and reminded me to call if I needed anything. When I turned to Jerome, he shrugged faintly. "Don't worry, Simone. It was probably nothing," he said. "Old houses, right?" His attempt to soothe me only left a faint ache. The house felt different now, empty and silent. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the distant hum of the city and every small creak of the house. Each shadow on the wall made my heart race. I switched on every light I could find. Finally, exhaustion claimed me, but a lingering thought echoed in my mind. Something about that old house didn't feel right. Months later, I officially retired. The pace of my life slowed, and the quiet house became my whole world by day. But at night, I often felt uneasy. The empty rooms felt too quiet without the bustle of work. Every creak or whisper in the old wooden floors made me jump. One night a few weeks after I retired, I woke in the middle of the night to strange noises upstairs. At first it was just a faint creak, as if a chair had been moved. Then I heard a heavier scrape, like footsteps pacing back and forth over my head, and even the soft rustle of paper turning. Jerome was away on a trip, and I was alone in the house. My heart hammered. I tried to tell myself it was just the house settling or maybe a rat moving about, but sleep deserted me that night. The next morning at breakfast, I mentioned the sounds to Jerome. He yawned, barely looking up from his newspaper. "Oh, honey, it's just rats," he said dismissively. "Our attic is full of old stuff, a perfect mouse paradise. I'll set some traps." He shrugged as if that explained everything. I nodded and tried to let it go, but that night I lay awake listening to silence, waiting for noise that never came. Then came something even stranger. I had bought a package of my favorite spicy sausage from the market, something I rarely indulged in since Jerome hated spicy food. I wrapped it and put it in the refrigerator to save for later. The next morning, when I went to make breakfast, I froze. The sausage was missing one end, cut roughly as if someone had bitten it off. "Hey, Jerome," I said, walking into the living room where he was reading. "Is this sausage yours?" "It's cut." He blinked at me. "What sausage?" he asked blankly. "The spicy one I bought yesterday," I said. Jerome frowned. He did not even look up from his paper. "Oh," he finally said. "I might have tasted a bit of it last night." I was curious. It was actually not bad. I was shocked. Jerome never even liked pepper, and he never tasted my cooking without asking. My pulse quickened. I mumbled that it was fine and left it at that, though my mind raced. 2 nights later, the sausage was gone entirely. I opened the fridge for a midnight snack and found the empty wrapper crumpled in the corner. Inside, just a few crumbs. Again I confronted Jerome, gently this time. "The sausage I bought, it's gone. Have you seen it?" He gave me a puzzled look. "Sausage? Simone, I didn't even know you bought one. Are you sure you left it here?" I nodded. He shrugged. "Maybe the dog got it," he joked weakly. But our dog was old and never ate leftovers from the fridge. I didn't press it further. Fear was growing in me like an ice block in my chest. That weekend, Jerome and I drove to Charleston to visit friends. We left early in the morning and returned late at night. I headed upstairs to wash up. But as I stepped into the second-floor bathroom, I felt something cold and damp beneath my feet. The entire floor was soaked. Water seeped between my sandals, icy cold. I flipped on the light and saw the shower area glistening, drops still sliding down the walls, as if someone had just taken a shower. My heart thudded. We hadn't been home all day. I walked into the hallway calling for Jerome. He appeared a moment later, yawning as if awakened from a nap. I pointed to the bathroom floor. "Look," I said, "the floor is flooded. Someone has been here." Jerome peered in. He said. "Maybe the rain came in through the ceiling vent and drenched the shower area." He motioned out the window. "See, there are some storm clouds out. It must have leaked." I stepped outside to check the street. It was dry under the streetlights. No puddles or rain at all. I turned back. "It hasn't rained, Jerome," I said softly. He frowned, looking annoyed. "Well, maybe a pipe will leak tomorrow, who knows? It's just old plumbing. Don't worry about it." I went to the kitchen faucet and turned it on to feel if any unusual cold water spurted, but it was normal. Something didn't add up. The next morning, everything was dry as if nothing had happened. I inspected the vent and pipes. Nothing was amiss. Jerome's explanation felt hollow. Lying in bed that night, I kept replaying the incidents, the attic noises, the bitten sausage, the flooded bathroom. Alone in the dark, I realized they might all be connected. Anxiety twisted inside me. I decided I wouldn't ignore this any longer. Something strange was happening in my home, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. A week later, I decided to tackle Jerome's study. The small room on the second floor was his pride. Oak shelves lined with old books and a chaotic desk piled high with papers. I opened the door and stepped inside. It was dusty. A light still shone from his desk lamp, forgotten from the evening. As I reached to straighten a pile of manuscripts, I accidentally knocked a small box on the desk. Something slipped from it, sliding across the floor. My heart pounded. I knelt and discovered it, a slim leather-bound notebook. It had a dark cover and an old leather strap. Curious, I opened it. The pages were filled with neat, flowing handwriting, a woman's handwriting. The notes described story ideas, character names, whole paragraphs of dialogue. I flipped through more pages. These story outlines were filled with emotion and detail that sounded eerily familiar, almost like plots from Jerome's novels, but not the way Jerome would write them. Who had written this? Shock froze me. Jerome never wrote by hand. He insisted on using a computer. And yet here were pages of prose in his own study. My mind raced. I quickly closed the notebook and tucked it into my tote bag. I couldn't ask him about it now. I returned everything to the drawer as if nothing had happened and left the study with a smile, though my hands felt ice cold the rest of the day. That night, I lay in bed restless. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft creak in the hallway. Frozen, I sat up. The hallway light was off, but I saw the attic door slightly ajar, a dark crack in the wall. My pulse skyrocketed. Somebody or something had opened it. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed and crept down the hall. I reached up and pushed the door shut. The rusty latch clicked. Jerome, the attic door was open. I whispered urgently as I gently shook him. He stirred, squinted at the closed door, and touched the latch himself. "Simone," he mumbled, "you're dreaming." He kissed my forehead and pulled the covers over us. I lay awake, heart racing, unsure what I'd seen. 3 nights later, I woke again thirsty. Groggily, I realized Jerome's side of the bed was empty. Panic rising, I slipped on my robe and crept downstairs. In the hallway, I caught sight of him. Jerome was descending the stairs barefoot, carrying a porcelain plate. Confused, I watched him carefully. The moment he noticed me, his hand slipped and the plate crashed onto the floor. White shards scattered everywhere. We stared at the pieces. I noticed the plate was clean, no food crumbs, strange. Jerome's mouth fell open. "Jerome!" I exclaimed softly. "What's going on?" He bent to pick up the pieces, avoiding my eyes. I was hungry," he said uneasily. "I ate earlier." "Earlier?" I asked, heart tightening. He stood quickly, glancing up. "Just go back to bed, Simone," he muttered. I nodded in silence. I helped him gather the fragments. He walked away without looking at me again. I went back upstairs, unsettled and afraid. The next morning, Jerome acted strangely. "I need to leave for a few days," he announced abruptly over breakfast. "There's a last-minute work trip to Atlanta I can't skip." "What?" I sat up. "Why didn't you tell me until now?" He avoided my gaze, gathering things. "It was decided late last night," he said. "I'll be back in a few days." He then turned, placing both hands on my shoulders. His face was serious. "Promise me something," he said quietly. "Don't open this house to anyone while I'm gone. Especially don't let anyone from the publishing house in. If Mr. Sterling calls, just say I'm away." "Mr. Sterling?" I asked, confused. "Your editor?" Jerome smiled oddly. "Yes. Please promise me." He was pleading. Concerned, I nodded. He kissed my cheek and hurried out the door with his suitcase. Almost immediately, the doorbell rang. My stomach fluttered. I peered through the peephole. There stood Mr. Sterling, Jerome's editor, and a young assistant. Mr. Sterling's face was stern. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Mr. Sterling," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He stepped inside and went straight to the point. "Mrs. Whitlock, where is the manuscript?" "Jerome left weeks overdue on his contract," he demanded. "Your neighbor told me he saw lights in your attic every night. If Jerome is truly working on the book, he should have it finished, not hiding. Are you lying to me?" My mouth went dry. I repeated Jerome's story carefully. "He said he left early this morning for a change of scenery," I said. Mr. Sterling glared at me. "I know better," he said softly. His assistant added, "We only want to help him finish." "But this is strange." I felt panic and shock. The attic light. Everything slammed together in my mind. Jerome's odd behavior, the notebook, those noises, it all pointed to the attic. My chest tightened. I promised to contact Jerome when I could. After they left, heart pounding, I leaned against the door. Jerome had been hiding something right under my nose. Determined to uncover the truth, I retrieved the old folding ladder from the shed. It was heavy and covered in dust. I carried it to the second-floor hallway and placed it under the attic hatch. With hands shaking, I climbed up. Each rung creaked under me, echoing in the silent house. Finally, I reached the attic and lifted the hatch. Darkness spilled out. I flipped on my phone's flashlight. As I ascended the last steps, the beam of light cut through years of dust. I took a deep breath and stepped into the attic. My heart hammered. I was about to discover the truth. For a moment, I couldn't see anything beyond the flashlight's beam. Then, across the attic in the dim light, a shape stirred. My breath caught. It was a woman, thin and disheveled, sitting at a small wooden table under the faint glow of an old lamp. She wore a tattered white dress, and her long hair fell around her shoulders. I stood frozen. The woman was writing furiously in a notebook. When she heard me, her head jerked up. We stared at each other for a few heartbeats, shock and recognition flashing in our eyes. Then I recognized her. "Alana," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Yes," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "Simone, my sister." She was so thin I felt bones through her skin, her face drawn with pain. I rushed forward and wrapped her in my arms. She collapsed against me, sobbing. "I never thought I'd see you again." We held each other silently for a long time. I guided her to an old armchair and sat beside her, holding her hands. She was quiet for a moment, trembling. At last I said, "Alana, tell me everything." Her eyes filled with tears as she began. It was that night 30 years ago. I was young and naive. Darren Albright, my editor, invited me to his apartment. I thought it was about my writing, but he was drunk and tried to force himself on me. She took a shaky breath. I fought back. I picked up a small marble statue from his table and hit him with it. Her voice broke. He fell and hit his head on the table. He was dead. "Oh God," I whispered, stunned. And then, he collapsed. I was so scared I started screaming. Jerome came in then. He saw me, he saw what happened. Alana's hand found mine. "Simone, I thought I was finished." Jerome looked at me calmly. He said, "Don't call the police, Alana. You'll ruin everything." He said I'd go to prison for murder. Then he said he'd help me for your sake. My heart ached as I listened. I remembered how devastated I'd been when Alana vanished, and how Jerome had comforted me. Alana continued. "He buried Darren's body that night, in the woods by the river. He brought me here into the attic and shut me away. He said it would just be temporary, until everything blew over. Then he left as if nothing had happened. I was alone. Tears spilled down my face as I realized the truth. Jerome had lied to me all these years. Everything he wrote, the success he had, it was built on Alana's sacrifice. I tried to escape, but the windows were barred. I was locked in," Alana said, voice low. "He visited occasionally to bring food. At first I was so grateful to still be alive. But as years passed, I understood I would never leave." 30 years trapped," I whispered, unable to believe it. Alana nodded. "I learned to speak only when he brought meals at night. I wrote every day, imagining freedom. I wrote under the name Alana Lucia Whitlock." Her eyes shone with memory. "And whenever I could, I'd hope for help. But Jerome promised he was protecting you and our family's reputation. He said no one would ever find out." I squeezed her hand, furious at Jerome. "He has been cruel. But you're here now." She managed a sad smile. "I held on because of you. I was terrified for you." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, "Alana, we'll go to the police. They need your story." Alana took a shuddering breath. "I want that, yes. I can't stay silent any longer." I helped her up. Together, we made our way out of the attic. As we descended the ladder, she leaned on me. The attic lay behind us, holding the past. We stepped into the hallway and I whispered, "It's going to be okay. I promise." We made our way downstairs hand in hand. The truth was finally out, and I would be with Alana every step of the way. The next morning, I drove Alana to the police station. The cold February air bit at my cheeks as we walked inside. We were led to a small interview room where detectives sat waiting with solemn expressions. Alana began to speak. Her voice was calm and clear as she recounted everything. Darren Albright, the attack, Jerome's arrival, the burial, her years in the attic. I held her hand through it, giving her strength. The detectives only asked a few clarifying questions. I remained quiet. The story was hers to tell. After she finished, the lead detective nodded gravely. "We'll verify your story," he said gently. "Thank you for coming forward." Within the hour, officers searched our house and attic. They found exactly what Alana described. Jerome's unpublished manuscripts filled with her handwriting, her notebooks, and evidence of where she had lived up there. Another team went to the river woods. Late that afternoon, they returned with grim news. They found a shallow grave under a willow tree. When I saw the body, I felt sick. The police took samples, and within days DNA tests confirmed it. The remains were Darren Albright's. Alana's words were true. By then, the news was spreading. Detectives tracked Jerome down at the airport. Television cameras caught the moment he was escorted out of his car by officers. Headlines the next morning read, "Novelist Jerome Whitlock arrested, Savannah's ghostwriter scandal." I watched the reports in shock. Jerome, the man I once loved, was now a convicted criminal. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, but mostly I felt empty and betrayed. Alana and I gave statements, and the case moved quickly. Jerome was charged with murder, kidnapping, fraud, and obstruction of justice. We didn't attend the trial. The newspapers covered every detail. They exposed Jerome's lies and credited Alana for her writing. I learned that Jerome was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. After those days of media frenzy, I focused on Alana. I stayed by her side, helping her cope. I found a good lawyer who argued that Alana had been a victim all along. The lawyer promised to fight for her as well. Then one morning the phone rang. My heart stopped when I recognized the detention center number. "Mrs. Whitlock," the voice said softly. "This is Detective Harris. I have terrible news. I'm so sorry, your sister, Alana Whitlock, took her own life last night." The world spun. I dropped the phone. Alana was gone. Later that day, an officer handed me a folded letter from Alana. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The familiar handwriting brought tears. "Dear Sister Simone, I never thought I would see you again, not like this. For 30 years I lived in darkness, and you know what that feels like. I can't fight anymore. I don't regret finally telling the truth. I'm sorry it hurt so much. Think of it as I have finished the story of my life. The notebook I wrote in the attic is under the desk. Please publish it in my name, Alana Lucia Whitlock. It's the story of what I went through, and now it's time it saw the light. I love you. Be brave now. Alana, ***. I folded the letter to my chest and wept. Her final words were filled with love and courage. Even after death, she was protecting me. Days later, I took her notebooks and that letter to the publishing house. The editors were hesitant at first, but when they read Alana's memoir, they were moved to tears. "We will publish this with the respect it deserves," the chief editor told me. Months passed. Alana's book, In the Attic, came out under her name, Alana Lucia Whitlock. I read the dedication at the book launch. For Alana, whose words set her free. People lined up to buy copies, many with tears in their eyes. Letters poured in from readers who were inspired by her story. Even Jerome's old novels were quietly reissued under Alana's name, recognizing her as their true author. On a sunny afternoon years later, I climbed into that attic again. It no longer felt oppressive. I had cleaned it and turned it into a small library. Shelves of Alana's books and papers lined the walls. Sunlight poured in through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air. I thought of Alana, free at last, her voice finally heard. As I stood there, I understood something important. No wall is thick enough to hold the truth forever. Lies can imprison us, but the truth always finds a way into the light. Alana paid a terrible price for her silence, but in the end, her courage gave her freedom and hope to others. If you're carrying a secret or suffering in silence, remember her story. Be brave. Speak your truth. Only then can you truly be free. And now, as I close her book for the final time, I know Alana's voice will live on. Her story has been told, and at last, both of us are free.